Hi everyone, it's me, Seth, an educator at Silverwood, and it's time for another Eco Art for Kids. We can go to Silverwood virtually, explore the art and nature on the trails, learning about what we see. Then we can bring it on home and learn how to make an art project. Come on, let's go to Silverwood. Today, we're going to find a common thread of nature that Bailey's discovered. Bailey?
Thank you, Seth. This is interpretive naturalist Bailey Call, and today we're going to talk a little bit about spiders. Spiders are fascinating little creatures. Many people find these animals scary or threatening, but I think they're just so different than us that sometimes it's hard to relate. So let's try and relate by diving in and learning more about these amazing animals and try to understand what makes them so remarkable. Let's get to learn a little bit about their family. Spiders belong to a family group called arachnids, and this group includes spiders, mites, ticks, and scorpions. Most of the animals in this group have 8 legs and 2 body parts, like you can see in the spider here. These body parts are a head and a thorax that are fused, called a cephalothorax, and an abdomen. They usually don't have antennae or wings. Spiders also don't have chewing type mouth parts. Their mouths are very small, so it's hard for them to be able to eat food that is not mostly liquid. Could you imagine changing all your food from a solid to a liquid to fit inside of your small mouth? It would take you a pretty long time to eat. In order for spiders to take their time, they have to have their food slow way down. Some spiders have super special tools for catching prey. You may have seen a spider web before, right? Well, this is one way that they catch their prey, but not all spiders make webs. Spider webs, though, are an amazing feat of engineering. They're able to trap their prey with pulleys and snares made from their web. They make them using spinnerets on their abdomen. The spinnerets help them make the pattern, while the silk glands inside their body make the silk. They weave and sew them in unique and amazing patterns and formations. You can see some of them, especially early in the mornings when there's still condensation on them or rain from the night before. Spiders wait on their webs and feel the vibrations. When something hits the web, the spiders can feel it with the tiny hairs on their legs. After their prey is in their web, they usually wrap it with their many legs and hold on to it with their pedipalps and sometimes their fangs. They then secrete like a cool substance that helps them change their food from a liquid to a solid. They're then able to finally gobble up some tasty bugs. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about spiders with me today, and I really like getting to teach you more about them. Thank you so much for joining me, and back to you, Seth.
Wow, Bailey, thank you. Spiders are so cool. Across the world, there are lots of different stories all about spiders. And many of them, the spider is actually a kind grandmother that weaves things for us. Perhaps a bit different from how we normally think of spiders, since some people think of them as scary. But one of the stories that I think is particularly interesting is a story that's rooted in Greek and Roman mythology. The story of Athena and Arachne. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a woman named Arachne, whose father taught her how to dye cloth and how to weave it. She became very good at weaving cloth. You know, she could bring the threads in and out, in and out, in and out, and weave them very tightly on her loom every single day. And she became known for making the most beautiful cloth. So much so that one day she said, "Why, I can make cloth even more beautiful than the goddess Athena herself." Now, in Greek and Roman mythology, gods and goddesses often could tell what humans were saying on Earth. So somehow Athena heard what was being said about her. And so she decided to disguise herself as an old, frail woman who came down to Earth and said to Arachne, I heard you say that you could make cloth even more beautiful than the goddess Athena, who's an expert weaver. Why, yes, I can make cloth more beautiful than the goddess Athena. Oh, really? Well, would you like to compete with her? Well, I could easily outweave her any time that I wanted, so if we did compete, I would win. Oh, really? And Athena transformed herself back into a true, beautiful form. Here I am, ready to compete, to weave with you. And so, the two of them began to weave, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, pulling the threads tightly, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, pulling the threads tightly, over and over, weaving beautiful cloth over time. When Athena was finished, she showed her cloth, and people looked in wonder and awe at the cloth the goddess had made. And when Arachne showed the cloth that she had woven, she had actually woven a story into the cloth that made fun of all of the gods and goddesses on Olympus, including Athena, making her look very foolish. Athena was enraged, and all of the people began to talk. Which of the cloths were more beautiful? I think that one might be the more beautiful one. No, it's that one. I think that it's Arachne's. Oh, yeah, definitely Arachne's. Definitely Arachne's. And everyone agreed that Arachne's cloth was the more beautiful of the two. This made Athena grow even more enraged. And so she looked at Arachne and she said, Fine, if you want to weave, then weave. And then Arachne began to shrink down and change. Athena had changed Arachne into a spider and told her, if you want to weave, weave. And so, Arachne turned into a spider. In Greek, Arachne actually means spider. Later on, the Latin language adapted that same word. And now when we speak in scientific nomenclature, the language that identifies animals, have adapted the same word. Arachnid means spider and comes from this same story. Cool, huh? Well, now that we've learned a little bit about spiders and about spider stories, it's time to make a weaving with Allison. Allison?
Hello everyone, I'm Allison. I'm an arts educator at Silverwood Park, and today I'm going to show you how to make a do-it-yourself cardboard loom and weaving. A weaving is a way of interlacing threads to make fabric. For today's project, we'll need a few simple supplies. I have a feeling you have most of these around your home already. We will need cardboard. I grabbed this right out of my recycling bin. A ruler. Scissors, string or yarn. So I found a few things around my home that I'm going to use. Feel free to use whatever is available to you. It's great if you can find some different colors. You could even use ribbon. Anything like that you could incorporate into this project. Tape and a marker or another writing implement. The first step to this project is going to be to set up our loom. A loom is basically a frame that we will use to create our weaving. So I'm going to start with a piece of cardboard. I have my marker here and I have a ruler. I'm going to draw a line down each side of my cardboard. It's about 1/2 inch from the edge. Now I'm going to measure 1/2 inch segments along each side. Notice how each measurement has a match on the other side that's directly across from it. That's what we want. Now that I've finished measuring, I'm going to use my scissors and cut each dash to create a slit. I'm going to end my slit at the solid line that I drew. Now that we've cut our slits, we're ready to set up our warp. There are two main components when weaving, the warp and the weft. The warp is stationary, that's what we're going to start. The weft is the part that moves between the warp to create the fabric. That might make a little bit more sense in a minute. To set up my warp, I'm going to be running string, creating tension between each of the slits that I've created. It usually works best to use simple string or thread for the warp. So in my case, I'm going to use this really simple white thread. You don't see the warp as much as you see the weft in the finished weaving, so you can choose something simple for this step. To start, I'm going to loosen up some string. I'm not cutting the string yet because I don't know how long I need it to be. And I'm going to pull this through the back. This is the back of my cardboard. I'm going to bring it around the front, and it's looping through the slit directly opposite. I'm going to come around the back, go through the next one. So if I'm doing this properly, the strings on the front of my loom are going to be perfectly parallel. The strings on the back are going to be diagonal as they travel to the next slit. There is the front of my loom. So now I can cut this back string, and I find it really helpful to tape both ends down. The cardboard does hold it pretty well, but things will be under tension as we start working, so it can be useful to just tape those down nice and securely. Now that we have our warp set up, we're ready to start weaving. I'm going to start with this blue yarn. If you have access to a large needle, that's an excellent tool for this application. I don't. So instead, I'm going to use a piece of tape, just masking tape, a small piece, that I can wrap around the end of my yarn. And this just creates something a little bit more rigid that will be easier for me to weave with. Can cut off the excess tape. It's kind of like a little needle that I've created. Before I actually start weaving, I find it helpful to slide something. You could slide a ruler or a tool or another piece of cardboard underneath my warp. This isn't going to be part of my final piece. It's just going to make my job a little bit easier by creating some space between the warp threads and the cardboard backing. This is kind of optional. Some people might not find it necessary, but I think it's really helpful. So see how that just creates some space for us? Now I'm going to take my weft thread and I'm going to go over, under, and travel all the way across my piece of cardboard. And I'm pulling my yarn through. Now that I've reached the end of this row, I'm going to loop back from the other side, traveling in the opposite direction. So since I went over this string, I'm going to go under it this time. As I'm working, I like to just use my fingers to keep things nice and even, kind of push my string back. I'm not pulling things very tight because I don't want it to squeeze my weaving in. I'm going to travel back in the other direction now. And I'm going to continue until I run out of string or want to change colors. I'll be back to show you how to go about changing colors in just a moment. I spent some time weaving and I've reached the end of my first piece of yarn. And this end of the yarn is actually still connected to the ball. So I'm going to trim both of these ends, leaving a few inches of yarn. On each end, right? Both of these ends of yarn will get woven in later. You don't need to worry about them right now. You also don't need to knot anything right now. We're going to start with another piece of yarn. This gives us the opportunity to incorporate some stripes into our design. So I'm going to switch to this gray ball of yarn. That means I'm going to take a moment to wrap masking tape around the end, just like I did before, and then I'm going to start weaving. I'm going to start weaving just a few steps back from where this left off so that my two ends overlap, and that will make my weaving nice and strong. I've been working on my weaving for a little while, and this is what I have so far. I started with blue, I went to gray. I think I'll do some more blue next, and that will create a pattern, right? Weaving takes time. This might not be a project that you do all at once. One of the great things about this project is you could work on it over the course of a week or even longer, just doing a few passes with the warp each day. So I think I'm going to go sit outside and work on this for a little while. I'll be back. I'm back, and I spent quite a bit of time working on my weaving. You can see I've reached the end of my loom. Now I'm going to show you how we can remove our weaving from the cardboard loom and how to attend to these loose strings. When you're done with your weaving, the next step is to remove it from the loom. So I'm going to take the tape off the back. Now I'm going to use my scissors to cut straight down the center of these back strings. I'm going to start on one side, removing two strings that are next to each other or adjacent, like these two. And I'm going to tie a simple knot. Again, I don't want to pull too tight because I don't want to create unnecessary tension that might distort my weaving. What you end up with is like a little tassel, and that's going to hold the weaving and keep it secure. I'm going to do that across this side and this side. I have removed my weaving from my loom. So if you like, you could trim these little tassels so that they're shorter if you wanted to get them out of the way. I think they're kind of cute. They don't bother me, so I'm going to leave them. You might notice when you take your weaving off the loom that this side, the front side, with the part touching the cardboard while you were working, is really clean. It doesn't have any of the end bits that we could see while we were working on the weaving from the back. However, we still might want to deal with these a little bit to clean up our work so it looks nice and clean. I think the easiest way to do that is just to weave them in using my fingertips. So I just kind of pick one. I can pull it through the front, over and under the strings, just like you're weaving, basically sewing them in there a little bit so that there's just a small bit on the back that if you wanted, you could trim. But for the most part, it just kind of blends in to the cloth that we've made. I spent some time tucking in all the loose ends, and now my project is done. Thank you so much for joining me on Eco Art for Kids this week. I really loved learning how to weave with you. Back to you, Seth.
Thanks, Allison. I'm so glad that we could learn how to weave. Well, I hope that you have a chance to go outside and find spiders in your own yard or at Silverwood. Observe them up close. See what you notice. I also hope that you have a chance to make your own weaving or look up a couple of spider stories that you can find. Until next time, we'll see you again on another Eco Art for Kids. Bye!